We had our first board meeting this morning, and it was so wonderful. We're sitting there, and I'm just like, Aaron, you going to start the thing? I'm not. I'm just going to sit back and relax and enjoy my emeritus status.
Just do what you normally do and pretend I'm not here.
Oh, thank God!
Taking a look back and taking a look ahead, halfway through the year, we touch base with some higher ed tech managers, IT directors, and AV users about where they're headed and what concerns them about the year ahead. All that and more next on AV Week. This is AV Week, episode 672, recorded Friday, July 5th, 2024. AV user check-in. This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audio-visual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. This is kind of a weird one for us. Strange. Here in the States, for those of you who are not in the States, it is the 4th of July weekend, and not that any of you don't have the 4th of July, but here in the United States, we celebrate that as our Independence Day. It's a long conversation. I won't get into it, especially for our friends over in the UK. But needless to say, a lot of us have the weekend off, including 99.9% of anybody that I would have as a guest on AV Week, since we record on Fridays. So I figured it would be a nice time to step down and take a pause. Check in with the tech managers, the IT directors, the in-house integrators in our industry, and kind of see how we're doing, where they're headed, and maybe a concern or two that they might have. First up is my buddy, Mr. James King from UNLV. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim. Glad to be here.
And you got to host us in your fine city for InfoComm 2024. We appreciate it. You actually did a tour of your facility at the Gregorian Center. Talk for a second about the impact that InfoComm not just has on the industry, but specifically, on those the decision makers that not only attend the show but also network at the show and are able to come together and kind of learn from each other.
InfoComm is a great place to have those conversations with key folks that when you're working on issues and stuff that you can get to them and actually be in a room and have those conversations. So a lot of that happens at InfoComm. Yes, there's gear there. There's, networking, all that stuff, shows. So the tour, as you mentioned, that we did of our medical building, that was a good way of showing how we're taking the equipment that our manufacturers are building and actually deploying it into education spaces. The medical education building is a top of the line AV right now, and we are providing education for the next generation of doctors, especially in Nevada. As we know, Nevada is hurting for doctors, are hurting pretty hard. So they're getting top education with top equipment, and manufacturers get to see how that's impacting, and not just okay, I sold this box and that's it. Now they can actually see how it's being impacted.
So one thing I actually got to hang out with James for a bit. First part of the year, James was one of our first AVNation icons, and kind of walk around your facility, dude. And one of the things, besides the cadaver lab, which we'll get to if you ever catch me at a trade show, I will tell you that story. Let's just say that James had to poke his head in and make sure that there weren't any residents, and there was not, thankfully. But you were talking about the flexibility that you guys have there. You mentioned you've got doctors, you've got these what I'm going to refer to as huddle spaces. I know that's not what you call them, and you correct me here. But I'm walking through there because I spend a lot of my days in higher education, what I would call a typical one, right? And the first room that James and I went into was a lecture hall, right? The rest of your building, though, is what I would refer to as, in the corporate side, a huddle space, right? You got a display, you got a place, you got a whiteboard, right? And you got a place for people to connect. Talk for a second about how that corporate side of AV and that corporate side of communications is making its way into higher education.
I'll admit this was very hard for me to wrap my head around, coming from, like you would say, it's additional 4-year college and going to medical school. Is the rooms that you're talking about is what we call it is a PBL, or problem-based learning room. So what that is the students are actually broken up into small groups, about 10 students or so. They have a visor, a faculty advisor, and they will take a week and work on a case. It's
Yeah.
basically they use those whiteboards, they use the technology in the room that they can, if a student can't make it, now they can actually join the group remotely, have that two-way conversation. There is the digital whiteboarding that they can actually use if they need to. So it's a very hands-on group collaboration. It took me a while to wrap my head around it because I'm like you, I'm walking around the building when I first got there and go, where's all the classrooms?
Yep.
But med students use these smaller groups, these smaller rooms to actually work very closely.
So one thing I want to get into now is we mentioned Infocom. James is still in Vegas. I am thankfully not, based on the temperatures. But one of the things that we've watched over the last, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years, Avixa has consistently changed up their reporting, and Avixa and I don't always see eye to eye on things. But the one thing that the CEO Dave Labuscus and his team, Rochelle Richardson, and that group, is they've made a conscious effort to do a couple of things. Number one, it's what they call verified users, right? And that is 10 years ago, when you could say, oh, Infocom had 40,000 attendees. Well, sort of, right? There was a certain percentage of those folks that were manufacturers. They were exhibitors. They were people like me and folks in the press. And they've started to take those numbers away when they're reporting those qualified attendees. The second thing they've started to do is break out the percentages of how many international, how many folks that are coming for the first time, and how many end users. And that number has stayed traditionally around 30%, plus or minus 2 or 3 points. Why is it important for end users? Why is it important for the IT managers and the in-house integrators to attend Infocom?
But there's tons of great reasons. One, if you are someone who is concerned about gear, you can actually put your hand on the gear, see it, all that stuff. If you're someone like me, I can learn about gear online. I can see that anytime. So I have key conversations with key folks at each booth and stuff, and as well the network. I know networking is a very big, social media, people connecting, all that stuff. But it's very important for end users because, like, I'll admit, I was shocked on the tour we gave. About half, we were sold out. It was a sold out tour. I would say about half, maybe a little less, were higher ed med tech managers.
Wow.
That shocked me. I did not expect that. And they were there to learn what other med schools are doing. And so those tours were great that they can actually go in through the room, go through the IDFs, go through the lecterns, and see what other med schools are doing, that what we are doing at UNLV. I know when I go and visit other schools, I'm going into those conversations as well. Hey, how are you handling this? How are you doing that? So a show like Infocom gives us one location that really have those conversations. And I mean, I'll be amiss if I don't mention the HEPMA booth. We are a end user group. That booth was jamming all 3 days at the show, and there was a lot of key conversations that were happening at that booth between other end users.
And see, that was one thing about that community is, AVNation, we our overarching corporate entity is TTI, right? Integrator out of St. Louis. When you get a lot of integrators together, there is the tendency for secrets to be kept, right? Oh, I'm not going to give you my secret sauce. Oh, I'm not going to tell you how I did this. Those walls are completely eliminated when it comes to higher education. You want to know how James King did something? Guess what? Get on his Slack or email him. He'll tell you all day long. And I think that's one of the things that is still heartwarming about that community is you guys and gals, you're helping each other out. And there is no pretense here. There's no, oh, this is James King's, secret proprietary information. No, the brother will tell you all day long how he did anything.
Oh yeah, that's one thing that's great about our community is we always say that is our schools might be competitors, but we're not competitors.
Yeah.
We're here to help each other. We all, as we said, we all deal with the same challenges. Some just have more zeros behind them. So being able to help and, build up each other is a great thing. And that's one of the great things about the HEPMA community is being able to help each other. And, we all have the same goal, to educate our students. We want our students to have the top education they can. And our equipment, the AV equipment, is a tool that the instructors are using. So we want to make sure we are providing the best tool for their education.
All right, James, as we wrap up here, one of the things that has come out, actually, quite frankly, from Infocom is there some manufacturers that are looking at the numbers, their sales numbers, right? And they're like, okay, not great first half of the year, right? Some would couch it as being soft. Not something that you guys and gals in the higher education space need to concern yourself with, but when you look at the second half of this year, what's something that concerns you? What's something that is something that you're looking at as either an opportunity or a problem to be faced?
It's been a little odd for me this year because I am in a new building, so I'm not looking at those builds, but I do have some projects going on. And one of the things that concerns me is lead time. Yes, things have gotten better, but I'm still hearing sometimes, well, that's going to take a little bit. That's going to take a little longer. Hey, it's supposed to be in this month. Well, now it got pushed to the next month. So I'm hearing that, and that's not just with the tech gear. I'm hearing that on all aspects. I'm seeing that in a couple of things on projects we've seen where things are just getting a little delayed. So that's still a concern of mine is, hey, especially in higher ed, we just passed our fiscal year. So June 30th is our fiscal year. July 1st starts a new one. We had to have all equipment in by June 30th. And if it didn't, we didn't pay for it until the next fiscal year. So we had to verify with manufacturer, hey, you're going to have this to us by June 30th. And somewhere yet, yes, we will. And then they're like, wait, no, sorry, it got delayed. And I'm like, no, I can't accept that delay. Like, we have to make this work. So that is a concerning is the delays in the equipment.
Very good. James King from UNLV. Sir, how do people connect with you and how do they get a hold of your fantastic podcast?
Podcast, thank you. That Tim is Steve Greenblatt and I co-host the Ask the Program podcast. It's on all the platforms, podcasts, YouTube. We also created a community on LinkedIn called Ask the Programmer. We're trying to build that community as well. Again, you're trying to find me. I'm on LinkedIn in that community. And then I'm also on X, Twitter, whatever we're calling it these days as AV_James King. Anything with HEPMA, I'm involved there. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
All right, and now joining me is a very, very dear friend, AV Dawn Meade. How are you, ma'am?
Very good, Tim. Thanks for having me on today.
Absolutely. So we mentioned at the top of the show, we're catching up with end users, and it's fascinating to me because Dawn wasn't always an end user. When I met her, you're an integrator, right? And you started out where Dawn started out in life, being a dance major, but that's a whole other kettle of fish, and we'll talk about that later. But you were an integrator, right? And you've migrated over from being an integrator to an end user. Corporate is how I would generically put your end userness. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, although I always hesitate when people say you're an end user because to most of the AV people, I am an end user, but within the company, I'm the integrator and the consultant. And then I partner with actual integrators to come in and work on projects for me. So it's an odd role. I'm not doing things too dissimilar from what I did as an integrator. I'm just doing it for the same company and the same clients, so to speak, all the time. And those clients are my coworkers.
Okay. So, but that's okay. There's a term that some integrators hate. I've learned. And that's the in-house integrator, right? And define that for me and kind of your role there, because you're right. You are not, and when I was a tech manager, it was difficult when we were talking to dealers because yes, we were technically the end user, but we weren't the end user, right? We weren't the faculty, we weren't staff. Same thing with you, right? You are technically the end user. You're the customer when it comes to AVI, SPL, or whoever, but you're not necessarily the ones using that on a daily basis. How do you make that distinction?
I mean, it's difficult because, especially even in my case, my company has customers. So sometimes the rooms and the rooms and projects that we're doing are for the company's end users, and
Yeah.
sometimes the end users of the room are my coworkers. So even in that regard, it's really challenging. I just kind of say, look, I was an integrator. I know enough to be dangerous. Let's partner up and do something good for whoever's at the end of this trail. And I do try to get the people at the end of the trail involved, whether it's a customer or a coworker customer. But then you
Yeah.
run into the case of, well, facilities brought me in. So facility wants to talk to me. It's the same argument we had as an integrator with GCs. You come in as a GC partner. It's like, well, no, I need to talk with the guy or gal that's going to be pushing the buttons on a day to day to get the real scoop, to get the real needs analysis, to get the real reason we're doing this. So
Yeah.
it just adds another layer or two of complexity to that mindset from being an integrator.
Yeah. We mentioned the fact that we're recording this over the July, the 1st of July. Dawn and I, she dressed for this. I did not. Mainly because I do not have Star Spangled earrings. Although I did discover recently my ear is still pierced, much to the horror of my daughter. But we're halfway through the year, right? And we've got a couple higher ed folks, which higher ed has a different workflow in the summer than corporate does. I'm assuming higher ed's really kind of slammed. Corporate seems to be, you guys are mostly kind of the fall and then the first of the year. Where are you guys at when it comes to, whether that is, I don't know if you want to call it return to work or your new work system or the hybrid or whatever, but how are you guys evolving your spaces given your new work, I guess, space reality?
Well, we are bringing in a lot more people that were working at home, but also, and of course, summer is intern season. So, thousands of college students come into our various buildings and facilities wandering around like children, and they're grown adults, and I feel really old. But finding spots for all of them and all of the folks coming back from remote work and places in the facilities, like in the buildings that need to be completely demoed and rebuilt, it's really challenging. We have one building not too far from me where we have several different program teams in trailers. It's like, the elementary school that won't build a new wing. We've got these engineers out in trailers. But we are doing a lot of reno work. We've got a lot of projects percolating that way. We're building new buildings. We're, but all of these spaces, they're having us make hybrid ready or flexible spaces so that we can add people, but not necessarily bring everyone back, or, have half the team back and half not. So right now we're in a frenzy of design and planning and reno demo kind of work, which means my team's busy because we're coming in and meeting with the facilities folks and the GCs and telling them what they're going to need and how far up on the wall to put the power supply, the power and the network drops and that sort of thing. So it's very busy. Even if some of these projects were funded and planned at the beginning of the year or even last year for this year's budget, that doesn't mean they brought me in at that point. So now the ones that are working now are bringing me in to work on them. Meanwhile, the projects that we just budgeted for this year are slowly, until I came in corporate, I had no idea just how miserably slow some procurement teams can be. Project that we were budgeted for and ready to go on January 1st is still working on getting POs out. I mean, you don't.
Good Lord.
Yeah, it's, we move at a glacial pace in a lot of cases, and then everything has to be wrapped up and billed and done by the end of the year because that's the end of our fiscal. So right about June, which is where we are, beginning of July, is when all the people start panicking. Oh my gosh, they're going to take away our budget if we don't spend it right now because it has to be done by the end of the year. And if you can't guarantee that, so it's a really weird transition in that we're frantically busy, but we're really not because we're just trying to do things behind the scene. And, if you're an integrator and listening, I am so sorry. I was in your shoes. It used to drive me nuts. I promise we're not holding things back just to hold things back. It kills me.
You mentioned something there, though, that it's a combination there of you guys are building new buildings, but you're also making those hybrid ready. That's an interesting kind of contrast with some of the things that I'm at least reading outside of the AV industry, where they're talking about the collapse is a bit melodramatic, but the collapse of the real estate market, right? The commercial real estate market. You guys aren't seeing that though, because if you are building new buildings, obviously you're not seeing that. When you're building those buildings, though, do you see where, obviously you guys are making, a capital investment in making them hybrid ready? Are you doing that because that's where you see it going for the next foreseeable future, where all of your spaces, or at least a majority of them, are going to have to be hybrid ready?
I think they all are. And here's where, what Tim didn't say when he said I'm corporate, I'm also within the government, military, industrial complex kind of defense area, which is why we never tell you where I work. But we also have some unique needs that some other places don't. So some of these places that we're building are fully skiffed out and can't have any connectivity. Some of the places, like the one new building we're building, it's mostly manufacturing. And even during the shutdowns and everything, manufacturing folks, necessary workers, you're going to work in person. I think the biggest reason we're going hybrid with most, if not all of our spaces, is because prior to COVID, when we would have these disparate places, and I mean, we literally have sites in probably every state, and I don't know how many countries. If we had a meeting in some of those spots, 9 times out of 10, you're on an airplane and you're flying to those spots to have that meeting, or doing it via telephone or primitive, VTC. But with all of the Zoom and Teams and Zoom Gov and those sorts of things that we now have, and that everybody understands post-COVID and that everybody uses post-COVID, suddenly the executives and the higher ups and even just the manager levels are saying, well, other than when I need someone there to physically run a system or physically shoot something, why am I paying to fly these folks there for every single meeting? If we have the conference rooms, if we have the huddle spaces, if we have the whatever that are ready to go with professional level and reliable VTC or whatever we're calling web calling, that's what we're going to use. And then we can save all of that airplane budget for when the president of the company has to go, or for when the video team that's doing a specific shoot with cameras and, all the whole bells and whistles has to go, and sort of save a lot of time and energy on everyone's part. So some of it's people still working at home, and some of this hybrid is just making it a more global company with better communication and not so many hours in the airport.
Dawn, as we wrap up here, take a look. We mentioned this is halfway through the year. So you mentioned one of the concerns, I think, is getting all your POs pulled. But is there anything else that concerns you getting into the second half of 2024?
I mean, honestly, that and keeping on top of the new products coming out or the new features coming out, it has been my personal biggest concern. And again, everything we record these days is BC and AC. We're in AC after COVID, and after COVID, that crush at the end of the year, they had to be flexible for a few years, because in the 75 years or whatever of my company, they never had a PO unfinished at the end of the fiscal year. They would finish all their jobs, no matter what kind of technology or buying or building they were doing. It was this year, or it was planned as a multi-year. And that was only like the big construction. Now that we're post-COVID and we had things running over and trying to close and the whole supply chain mess, it's a little different or a little more flexible, but every year getting things done in the last half of the year and making sure it's done right in a hurry is my biggest concern. A lot of the things we talk about coming up this year, the AI stuff, we're dipping our toes into it in a limited way. But again, with the nature of our company and our work, we're not going to be bleeding edge on everything, but we're going to definitely be bleeding edge on others. And AI and computers thinking for themselves, we may design some of that stuff, we may build some of that stuff, but put it in our closed environment and work on our networks, and we didn't build it, it's a different animal. So I think my concern is definitely the end of year crush and just getting through the approvals process and getting some of the newer technologies ready to go for us anyway.
All right. Dawn Meade, thank you so much. How do people connect with you if they are so inclined?
If they are so inclined, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dawn Meade, Meade, just like the fort and the general. And if you're looking for me anywhere else on the socials, it's at AV Dawn. And I'm sure I'm in the archives here on AVNation quite a bit. So look there and I'll see you around.
All right. Last and not least, there's a joke here I could do about saving the best for last, saving the most fantastic for last. But ladies and gentlemen, he needs no introduction. Dr. Josiah Way. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fabulous. And before we hit the record, you called me the anchor. You called me fat. So I'll take save the best for last instead of being the fat anchor.
In the world of broadcasting and media production, the anchor is the person who brings the whole thing home, and I'm the fat guy here. All right. So Joe, we're recording this 1st of July. You are no longer the chair of HETMA.
Woo! That's fantastic. We had our first board meeting this morning. It's bright and early. We do it on first Monday of every month, and it was so wonderful. We're sitting there, and I'm just like, Aaron, you going to start the thing? I'm not. I'm just going to sit back and relax and enjoy my emeritus status.
Yeah.
So. Yes, it's exciting actually to see HETMA take this next step. Actually, 5 years of incredible growth. I mean, just to sit there and think 3,409 badge scans at Infocom. I mean, those are big numbers, right?
Oh yeah,
and to see
really quickly
that.
on that, I want to continue. The average badge scan at Infocom is typically 250 to 300 people. And you had 10 times that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I do thank the group coming together, but I think it's a testament to, one of the things that we've seen in a change in the industry, right, is the move to end users, right, at a show, right, just attending the show, 1/3 end users, right. And so you think people have said even last year when we first did our booth, why would you be there? Why would an end user group put a booth on a floor, right? Well, it turns out that was probably a very wise decision because now 1/3 of the attendees have a place where they can go, oh, I'm represented here,
yeah.
Right? We don't sell anything. As Aaron, our new chair, kind of coined this last week, our people are our product,
yeah.
Right? And so to give a space for them, is really what made it happen, to be that magnet for everyone to draw through. We were having manufacturers send people. How many higher ed people came to the booth to get information and get scanned because they said, oh, I was at so-and-so's booth, a manufacturer. They saw my education, said, oh, do you know about HETMA?
Yeah.
Right? Are you a member there? And they're like, what? It's like, well, you have to go there. Your people are over there. And so I thought that was really cool.
Well, and I also want to point something out. That is a drastic sea change from, let's say, 10 years ago, and I'm going to give myself a little bit of margin here, 10 years ago, where manufacturers, a lot of them on the show floor, were not equipped, were not educated, did not know what to do if your badge said education or your badge said end user, or if they did, they would funnel you over to this one area and they had one rep there. Today, HETMA and other organizations, the manufacturers that are showing on the show floor of ISE, of Infocom, of all these other ones, they've educated themselves, and they've kind of embraced that presence of the end user. How important is that for higher education as well as corporate IT and tech managers?
Yeah, no, it's extremely important, right? Because the line I've always used is how we buy in volume, right? And we buy as a community. Our people, we are not competitors, we're colleagues, right? We're collaborators, not competition. And so by being able to have this group come together and represent in that way allows us to use our collective voice. And to, in order to really advocate, that's what HETMA was founded as, an advocacy organization. And that's really what we've been able to do. And to say, look, we have this buying power, this block power. We take care of our own people. We want to help. So by being able to do that, it's been really neat to actually see our manufacturer and our integrator partners come together. And yeah, I mean, if you remember my famous, I would call it my coming out party over at PSNI, AV as a Service Must Die, to put things on the map. But so you're going, wait, why is this end user coming in here and telling us how we should do business, right? It went from that, 6 years ago or whatever that was, to now we had a double-decker booth. And we had manufacturers who had smaller booths go, hey, can I use your office upstairs to have a business meeting with one of my clients? So like we're offering business space to manufacturers to utilize it. It's like, well, how about that for a change, right? And I think that's where we've seen the embracing of the higher education vertical, right? Even if you look at the CTI party, right? And you have always as CTI been such a huge support of the higher education vertical. Look every night who the last people closing it out is. It's a group of higher ed people always seemingly kind of hanging out, right? So I think that being embraced gives us the power to help drive the solutions that we need. But in truth, right? I mean, integrators want to sell us products we want to buy. Manufacturers want to make stuff we want to buy. It is very holistic and natural, which is great to see. But like you said, 10 years ago, people didn't think about it, what was happening. Now it's, I see us as an integral part, of course I'm biased, of the channel line anyway.
So this is a little bit cheeky, but also you'll understand it. What is Joe Way going to do now?
Sleep. I'm going to sleep.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, you know what? I'm actually going to start doing, I'm going to start being able to write more, speak more. The actually great thing about, not that I can speak much more than I already was, but the good thing about turning this over is to have Aaron and Ryan are really going to be able to take the operations. It was actually very hard to be more strategy and have to run everything, right? And I was horrible at returning emails on time, doing all this stuff because you're getting so many. So the fact that the organization now can have its own operations and move forward does allow myself and BC as co-founders to work more strategically and to help with our other initiatives and just help make it more successful in that way. And I get to focus. It's, I have a job now that actually makes me work. I'm not used to that.
I am going to get to that actually as we wrap up here. You have moved to USC. Actually, I think you came on a week or two right after that last year. The question about your job is taking a look at not just UCLA where you are now. You're coming from USC, but the folks that you're talking to this second half of this year, right? Higher education, the buying cycle, the budgets start July 1. Right. Mm-hmm. I remember that vividly because we had to make sure everything was in order here. What concerns you the last half of this year? What concerns you for the rest of 2024?
Yeah, no, it's good. Yes, the July 1st is the day you wake up and all of a sudden your account has a lot of zeros in it, which is great, right? Little extra zeros on the end of your budget lines. I think right now it's interesting, and I don't know. I'm not necessarily going to speak for the higher ed vertical. I will speak for us, because UCLA is going to be Olympic Village in the 2028 Olympics. So we are in the process, just like I was recruited into USC, in order to help us more strategy. We did the full rip everything out, put everything in, move our technologies forward, doing the exact same thing at UCLA, hiring my direct reports and getting our teams together. We're focusing on that. But really, we have a unique advantage to be able to look ahead, right? Like, am I throwing a bunch of gear in right now? No, because in 4 years, when the Olympics come, it would already be heading toward end of life, right? So we're going to be spending this next year doing proof of concept, be able to work with our partners to say, okay, where is technology going? And I'll answer the question you didn't ask, where is it going? And that is that I think that the move into cloud is finally here. I have this great position at UCLA where I sit on the leadership team, right? The AV guy has a literal seat at the table, and the department that goes in there. So it allows me to work seamlessly across the organization. My peers are our infrastructure team. My peers are our cloud services teams and our data analysts and all of that. So I have that opportunity. So we're really going to focus on where can things go? How can we actually do the things we've all said we want to do? Can I integrate third-party cloud services? Can I do that? And let's have some fun over this next year. So I'm not worried so much about supply chain and all of that. I do know, I hear my colleagues complain about it. I'm not going to worry about that till next summer. So hopefully we'll have another years of things getting caught up, but that's what we'll be doing. So we're just going to have a little bit of fun, toying around with some things. We got Chi come as my manager, AVIT Solutions. So he's going to go blow a bunch of stuff up, and we'll have fun with that and preparing for the future.
All right. Maybe I'll grab you in a year and see what you're concerned about then.
Absolutely.
Joey, seriously, thank you, buddy. How do people connect with you? How do people connect with HETMA or anything else that you wanna plug?
Yeah, you can find me on the X at TD Albright, at TD Albright on all of the socials. Don't follow me, but follow at TD Albright, and you can find HETMA _org everywhere. You can find me at Josiah Way on all of the socials.
Thank you, sir. As he said, don't follow me, but go by the website if you would, please, AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You will find this program and a host of others, including the aforementioned Aaron Meyer-Moran has a brand new episode of EdTech from the HETMA booth at InfoComm 2024. All that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. As all the time we have for AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.